Sometimes the past refuses to stay buried, no matter how deep you dig the grave. Maria Santos wiped the sweat from her forehead as she cut the lock on storage unit 247 in the blazing Bakersfield heat. The metal door groaned open like a coffin lid, revealing a darkness that seemed to swallow the desert sun. She'd blown her last $300 on this gamble, hoping to find something, anything, to keep the lights on for another month. But instead of furniture or forgotten treasures, she found them. Dozens of glass pickle jars lined the walls like a macabre museum, each filled with coins that caught the light like dead eyes. Every jar bore a carefully written label, dates, coordinates, initials, some dating back to when she was still riding with the Hells Angels, back when her husband Jake was alive, back when she thought the worst thing in her world was changing diapers with grease under her fingernails. Maria lifted one jar with trembling hands. The label read JS612 1998 to 35.36016, 119.0183 degree W. Those were Jake's initials. That was 3 months after their daughter Sophia was born. What kind of coins require GPS coordinates? And why did she recognize that location from the nightmares that still woke her some nights? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The jar felt heavier than it should have, the coins inside shifting with a sound like grinding teeth. Maria's hand shook as she held it up to the harsh fluorescent light buzzing overhead. The storage facility's industrial lighting cast everything in sickly yellow, making the shadows dance between the rows of containers like ghosts. She shouldn't be here. Sophia was waiting at home, probably sprawled across their threadbare couch doing homework while ESPN droned in the background. Her 16-year-old daughter had inherited Jake's ability to tune out the world when she needed to focus, a skill Maria envied more than she'd ever admit. Right now, Sophia was probably wondering why her mom was taking so long at what she'd called treasure hunting in someone else's junk. But this wasn't junk. The jars were arranged with military precision, each one exactly 6 inches from the next, labels facing forward like products in some twisted gift shop. Maria counted them, 43 in total. The dates stretched back to 1992, long before she'd met Jake, before she'd traded her leather jacket for stretch marks and sleepless nights. The August heat pressed against her back through the open storage unit door, but inside the metal container the air hung still and cold, carrying a metallic smell that reminded her of old blood. She'd smelled that scent before, years ago, when Jake would come home late with mud on his boots and grease that never quite washed out from under his fingernails. Maria set the jar with Jake's initials carefully on the concrete floor and picked up another. RM 315 1995 to 35.18018, 118.9217 degree. The coins inside weren't ordinary currency. They were too thick, too irregular. Some bore impressions she couldn't make out in the dim light, while others seemed almost melted, reformed into crude medallions. Her phone buzzed. Sophia's name flashed across the cracked screen. "Mom, when are you coming home? I'm starving and we're out of everything except those gross frozen burritos." "Soon, baby. Order a pizza. Use the emergency credit card." "We still have emergencies if we're broke?" Despite everything, Maria smiled. Sophia had Jake's smart mouth and his ability to find humor in the darkness. "Being broke is the emergency. I'll be home in an hour." She ended the call and stared deeper into the storage unit. Past the jars, she could make out the silhouettes of what she'd hoped to find. Furniture, boxes, the detritus of someone else's life that she could clean up and sell. But now those ordinary objects felt contaminated by proximity to whatever twisted collection surrounded them. The rational part of her brain, the part that had kept her alive through 15 years of single motherhood, screamed at her to walk away. Close the door, forfeit the money, pretend she'd never seen any of this. But the coordinates nagged at her like a splinter under the skin. She knew that first location, not just from nightmares, but from reality. Maria pulled out her phone again and typed the numbers into her GPS app. The map loaded slowly, the pin dropping onto a remote stretch of desert 20 miles outside Bakersfield. Rabbit Canyon. She'd been there exactly once, on a warm night in June 1998, when Jake had woken her at 3 a.m. and asked her to drive him out there to help a brother with some trouble. She'd waited in their old Camaro for 2 hours, while Jake and 3 other club members worked by flashlight in a wash that cut between the hills. When he'd finally climbed back into the passenger seat, his clothes had been dirty, and his hands shook when he lit his cigarette. "What kind of trouble?" she'd asked. "The kind you forget about," he'd said, and they'd driven home in silence. Maria had forgotten about it, or tried to. Jake died in a motorcycle accident 8 months later, and grief had a way of blurring the edges of uncomfortable memories. But looking at the jar with his initials, feeling the weight of those irregular coins, the night came rushing back with crystalline clarity. She tried the second set of coordinates. Another pin, another piece of desert, this one near the Tehachapi Mountains. She'd never been there, but something about the location felt familiar, like a song heard through static. The logical explanation was simple. Some kind of hobby, maybe coin collecting taken to an obsessive extreme. People attached sentimental meaning to the strangest things. The coordinates could be camping trips, special occasions, places someone wanted to remember. The initials might be friends, family members, people worth commemorating. But logic couldn't explain the cold knot in her stomach, or the way her skin crawled every time she looked at Jake's initials on that carefully printed label. Logic couldn't explain why she kept thinking about the taste of fear, metallic and sharp, or why she could suddenly remember the exact sound Jake's breathing made when he was trying not to cry. Maria grabbed the jar with Jake's initials and one other, a more recent one dated just 6 months ago, and backed out of the storage unit. The August sun hit her like a physical blow, but she welcomed the heat, the noise of traffic from the highway, the normal sounds of a world where people went to work and came home and didn't keep jars full of coins in the dark. She drove home clutching the steering wheel like an anchor, the 2 jars wrapped in an old beach towel on the passenger seat. Every pothole made them clink together, with a sound that set her teeth on edge. The familiar route through Bakersfield's east side, past the McDonald's where Sophia had worked last summer, the auto parts store where Tommy Vega still gave her the friends and family discount, the corner market where Mrs. Chen always asked about her daughter, felt surreal, like she was watching someone else's life through dirty glass. The apartment complex looked exactly as depressing as always. Sun-bleached stucco, dying grass, and a swimming pool that had been drained for maintenance since 2019. Maria parked next to the dumpster overflowing with pizza boxes and grabbed the towel-wrapped jars. For a moment she considered hiding them in the trunk, but something about leaving them in the heat felt wrong, disrespectful, even though she couldn't explain to whom or why. Sophia met her at the door, still in her Bakersfield High softball uniform, grass stains on her knees and her dark hair escaping from its ponytail, in the same way Maria's always had at that age. Before the club, before Jake, before everything got complicated. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Sophia said, stepping aside to let her mother pass. "Please tell me you found something good in there. I already told Jess I might have money for the beach trip next weekend." Maria set the towel bundle on the kitchen counter and immediately regretted it. Their small kitchen was the heart of their home, where Sophia did homework at the scarred wooden table Jake had built, where they ate breakfast together when their schedules aligned, where they'd cried together after Jake's funeral, and again when the insurance money ran out. The jars didn't belong here. "It's complicated," Maria said, moving the bundle to her bedroom. "What did you order?" "Pepperoni and those little peppers you pretend not to like. It should be here in 20 minutes. Sophia followed her to the bedroom doorway but didn't enter. She'd learned, somewhere along the way, to give her mother space when something was eating at her. "Mom, are you okay? You've got that look you had when Tommy called about Uncle Carlos getting arrested." Maria sat heavily on her bed, the same queen mattress she and Jake had bought at a warehouse sale 3 months before Sophia was born. everything in this apartment was measured in befores. Before Jake died, before money got tight, before she had to choose between Sophia's future and her own pride. "I'm fine, baby. Just tired." She looked at her daughter, really looked at her. Sophia had inherited the best of both her parents. Jake's easy smile and steady nerves, Maria's stubborn streak and sharp instincts. She'd never known her father as anything but the hero who died too young, the ghost rider whose picture sat on her nightstand next to her softball trophies. Maria had worked hard to keep it that way. "You sure?" Because Tio Raul called earlier asking if you needed anything, and he had that voice he gets when he thinks you're in trouble. Raul Martinez had been Jake's road captain, the closest thing to family either of them had left from the old days. After Jake died, Raul and the other desert ghosts had quietly made sure Maria and Sophia were never completely alone. When the transmission died on Maria's Honda, it got fixed. When Sophia needed school clothes, gift cards appeared. When Maria's pride wouldn't let her accept direct help, groceries showed up on their doorstep with notes claiming they'd been delivered to the wrong address. "What did you tell him?" Maria asked. "That you were out making money moves, which is what you always say when you don't want to explain what you're really doing." Sophia grinned, but worry flickered behind her eyes. "He said to remind you that family takes care of family." The words hit differently now. Family takes care of family. How far did that protection extend? How much did Raul and the others really know about Jake's activities in those final months? About late-night drives to the desert and the taste of fear that lingered for days afterward? The doorbell rang, saving Maria from her spiraling thoughts. Sophia jogged to answer it, her voice bright as she chatted with the delivery driver about the heat wave. Normal teenager behavior, the kind of easy interaction that reminded Maria what she was working so hard to protect. They ate dinner on the couch, watching a rerun of Sophia's favorite cooking show, the towel-wrapped jars forgotten in the bedroom like sleeping demons. Sophia talked about her upcoming senior year, about college applications and scholarship deadlines, about the future she'd been planning since middle school, a future that required Maria to keep their small world stable, predictable, safe. But even as she nodded and made appropriate responses, Maria's mind kept drifting to those coordinates, to the weight of irregular coins, to the memory of Jake's hands shaking as he lit his cigarette in the desert darkness. Some secrets, once disturbed, refused to stay buried. After Sophia went to bed, Maria sat alone in her kitchen, laptop open, the towel-wrapped jars on the table, like evidence from a crime she didn't want to solve. The pizza boxes lay empty beside her, the greasy smell mixing with the apartment's usual cocktail of air freshener and old carpet. She'd been staring at the Google search bar for 20 minutes, cursor blinking, waiting for courage she wasn't sure she possessed. Finally, she typed, "Missing persons, Nevada, California, 1995. The results loaded slowly on their bargain internet connection. Page after page of faces, teenagers who never came home, hikers who vanished on mountain trails, women who disappeared from parking lots and gas stations. Maria scrolled through them with growing nausea, looking for anything that matched the dates on those carefully labeled jars. She found the first one buried on page 6 of results. Rebecca Morrison, 23, last seen March 12, 1995, at a truck stop outside Barstow. 3 days before the date on the jar marked RM. The photo showed a young woman with bleached hair and tired eyes, the kind of girl who'd learned to be wary of strangers, but still needed to trust them to survive. Maria's hands trembled as she clicked through to the case details. Rebecca had been working her way north from Los Angeles, carrying everything she owned in a duffel bag decorated with band patches. The police report mentioned she'd been seen talking to motorcycle riders in the parking lot, but no one remembered descriptions, makes or models. The investigation went cold after 6 months. The coordinates from Rebecca's jar led to a spot in the Mojave National Preserve, miles from any road. Google Earth showed nothing but scrub brush and scattered rocks, the kind of place where someone could disappear forever if they weren't careful about where they stepped, or if someone wanted them to disappear. Maria unwrapped the second jar with shaking fingers. The label read CH to August 22, 2023, with coordinates that placed it near Lake Isabella. The date was only 10 months ago, recent enough that the case might still be active, the family still holding on to hope. She searched until she found him. Christopher Hayes, 31, a software engineer from Bakersfield, who'd gone camping alone and never returned. His Honda Civic was found at a trailhead, keys still in the ignition, wallet and phone left behind. Search and rescue had combed the area for weeks before giving up. The news articles showed a clean-cut man with kind eyes and a gentle smile, the sort of person who rescued spiders from bathtubs and called his mother every Sunday. The kind of person who never should have ended up as commemorative coins in a dead serial killer's trophy collection. Because that's what this was, Maria realized with crystalline certainty. Not a hobby or an obsession, but a memorial. Each jar marked a life stolen, a family destroyed, a future erased. And somehow, impossibly, Jake's initials were mixed in with the others. She opened the laptop again and searched for disappearances around June 1998, the night she'd driven Jake to Rabbit Canyon. It took longer this time, the older cases buried deeper in the digital archaeology of newspaper archives and police databases. But eventually, she found her. Anna Kowalski, 19, last seen June 18, 1998, hitchhiking on Highway 58 outside Tehachapi. She'd been working at a diner in Mojave, saving money for nursing school, when she'd gotten into an argument with her boyfriend and stormed out. The last confirmed sighting was at a gas station where the attendant remembered her arguing with someone on the payphone. After that, nothing. The jar with Jake's initials was dated June 20, 1998, 2 days after Anna disappeared. The coordinates matched the spot where Maria had waited in their old Camaro, watching Jake and 3 other club members work in the darkness. Her phone buzzed. A text from Raul. Haven't heard from you today, Hermana. Everything okay? Maria stared at the message, remembering his words through Sophia's voice. Family takes care of family. Had that protection extended to covering up murder? Had she unknowingly served as getaway driver for a killer, trusted and loved a man who collected souvenirs made from his victim's jewelry? She thought about Sophia's picture of Jake on her nightstand, about the stories Maria had told her daughter about a father who died too young, a good man taken before his time, about college applications and scholarship deadlines and the careful life they'd built on the foundation of that lie. Another buzz. Raul again, stopping by tomorrow afternoon. Got something Sophia left at the clubhouse. The words felt loaded with meaning she wasn't ready to interpret. Tomorrow afternoon meant less than 18 hours to decide what to do with the evidence sitting on her kitchen table. Evidence that could destroy not just Jake's memory, but potentially implicate Raul and others who'd been there that night in Rabbit Canyon. Maria looked at the jars, then at her laptop screen showing Anna Kowalski's smiling face. 19 years old, the same age Sophia would be next year. The choice crystallized before her with terrible clarity: protect the lie that kept her family whole or seek justice for the dead. Maria closed the laptop with shaking hands, but Anna Kowalski's 19-year-old face stayed burned in her mind. The resemblance to Sophia wasn't exact. Anna had been blonde where Sophia was dark, smaller-boned, with different eyes, but they shared something indefinable. Youth, maybe. Hope. The same bright future that should have stretched ahead of them like an open highway. She wrapped the jars back in the towel but couldn't bring herself to move them from the kitchen table. They sat there like radioactive material, contaminating everything around them with their implications. The coffee mug Sophia had left from breakfast, the stack of college brochures they'd been reviewing together, the photo on the refrigerator of Sophia at last month's softball tournament, grinning as she held up her MVP trophy. What would this do to her? Maria had spent 18 years crafting Sophia's understanding of her father, Jake Santos, the ghost rider who'd died too young in a motorcycle accident on Highway 99, the man who'd built Sophia's crib with his own hands, who'd sung lullabies in Spanish and English, who'd wanted nothing more than to watch his daughter grow up. Maria had fed Sophia story after story. Jake teaching her to ride a bike he'd never lived to see, Jake being proud of report cards he'd never received, Jake loving the strong, smart young woman Sophia had become. It wasn't entirely lies. Jake had built that crib, had sung those lullabies, had talked endlessly about their future together during Maria's pregnancy. But now those memories felt contaminated, like looking at old photographs and noticing sinister details you'd missed the first time. Had he been planning Anna Kowalski's death while he painted their baby's nursery? Had he been thinking about whatever sick collection he kept while he felt Sophia kick in Maria's belly? The questions made her physically ill. She rushed to the bathroom and dry-heaved over the toilet, her body rejecting thoughts too poisonous to process. When the spasms stopped, she splashed cold water on her face and stared at herself in the cracked mirror. She looked old. When had that happened? Lines around her eyes she didn't remember, grey threads in her black hair, a tightness around her mouth that spoke of too many years holding back words that needed to be said. 42 years old, and she felt ancient. But Sophia saw her differently. To Sophia, Maria was the woman who'd held their small family together through everything, who worked double shifts at the diner while finishing her GED, who'd learned to fix their Honda's transmission from YouTube videos, who'd never missed a softball game or parent conference or late-night crisis about boys or friends or the terrifying prospect of adulthood. Sophia trusted her completely, believed in the stories Maria told, the version of Jake she'd constructed, the careful mythology that made their struggles meaningful instead of just tragic. What happened to that trust when Sophia learned her mother had been lying about the most fundamental truth of her existence? Maria's phone buzzed again. Another message from Raoul, this one just a question mark. She could picture him in the clubhouse, surrounded by the other desert ghosts, maybe telling them about her silence. The club had its own way of handling problems, its own code about family loyalty and dangerous secrets. How much did they know? Had Raoul been there that night in Rabbit Canyon, one of the shadowy figures she'd watched working by flashlight? Were there other jars in that storage unit with his initials, Tommy's, Big Mike's? Had the entire club been complicit, or just unlucky enough to be associated with a killer? The rational choice was obvious. Call the police, turn over the evidence, let the professionals sort out who knew what and when. Give Anna Kowalski's family some closure, even after all these years. Do the right thing, the moral thing. The thing that would let her sleep at night knowing she'd chosen justice over convenience. But rationality was a luxury Maria couldn't afford. She had Sophia's college fund to think about, the small but growing savings account that depended on Raoul's occasional gifts and the club's loose network of members who threw work her way. She had their apartment, which came cheap because Big Mike owned the building and gave them a family discount. She had the 100 small ways the desert ghosts had woven themselves into their survival. More than that, she had Sophia's stability to protect. Her daughter had never known real chaos, never experienced the kind of upheaval that came when the foundations of your world cracked open. Sophia had grown up secure in her identity, confident in her family history, certain that she came from love, even if she'd lost her father young. What happened to a kid when that certainty disappeared overnight? When the father she'd idealized became a monster and the mother she'd trusted became a liar? When the extended family that had always supported them became potential accomplices to murder? Maria had seen kids break under less pressure, had watched Sophia's classmates crumble when their parents divorced, when family secrets came to light, when the adult world revealed itself as far more complicated and cruel than childhood had suggested. Sophia was strong, but 18 years old was still 18 years old. College applications were stressful enough without adding family trauma and potential federal investigations. The jars sat waiting for her decision, heavy with the weight of lives lost and lies told. Tomorrow afternoon, Raoul would knock on their door with his easy smile and whatever excuse he'd invented for checking on them. Maria had until then to decide which betrayal she could live with, abandoning the dead or destroying the living. Maria didn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table until dawn, laptop open, researching every coordinate, every date, every set of initials. 23 jars. 23 people who had vanished across 30 years, their lives reduced to commemorative coins made from melted jewelry and wedding rings and graduation gifts. The oldest jar dated back to 1992, before Maria had even met Jake. The newest was from 8 months ago, long after his death, which meant either the killer was still active or there had been more than one person involved. Either possibility made her stomach clench with fresh dread. When Sophia emerged for breakfast, hair still damp from her shower, Maria was hunched over the laptop like a woman possessed. The jars sat wrapped in their towel beside her, innocent-looking as a bundle of laundry. "Mom, did you even go to bed?" Sophia poured herself coffee, studying Maria's face with the sharp attention of someone who'd learned to read her mother's moods for survival. "You look like hell." "Couldn't sleep." Maria closed the laptop, but her hands stayed pressed against its surface as if it might spring open on its own. Too hot. It wasn't entirely a lie. The August heat had settled over Bakersfield like a suffocating blanket, and their ancient air conditioning unit wheezed uselessly in the living room window. But the heat wasn't what had kept her awake. Sophia sat across from her, cradling her coffee mug, the same spot where Maria had spread 23 missing persons reports across their scarred wooden table. "Want to talk about it?" The question hung in the morning air, heavy with 18 years of honesty between them. Maria had never lied to Sophia about the big things, not about Jake's death, not about their financial struggles, not about the complicated relationship they maintained with the desert ghosts. She'd always prided herself on treating her daughter like the intelligent person she was, capable of handling difficult truths. But this truth would change everything. "I need to drive somewhere today," Maria heard herself say. "Might be gone for a few hours." Sophia's eyebrows rose. "Somewhere specific? Or are you being mysterious on purpose?" "Specific." Maria looked at her daughter's face, memorizing the easy trust in her dark eyes. After today, that trust might never be the same. "I need to check something out. About the storage unit. Want company?" "I don't have to be at work until 4. The offer was casual, but Sophia's voice carried the undertone of someone who sensed undercurrents she couldn't name. She'd inherited her father's instincts along with his smile, the ability to read situations that felt off, even when she couldn't identify why. "Not this time, baby." Sophia nodded, but her expression sharpened. "Okay, but if you're not back by dinner, I'm calling Tio Raul." The name sent a chill through Maria's chest. Raul would be here this afternoon, expecting to find them both safe and normal, ready to accept whatever story he'd prepared about Sophia's forgotten item. Instead, he'd find Maria gone and Sophia alone, probably worried enough to start asking questions. Maria stood abruptly, decision crystallizing in her mind like ice forming on a windshield. "Actually, pack an overnight bag." "What?" "Pack a bag. Clothes for a day or two, your phone charger, whatever you need. We're leaving town for a little while." Sophia's coffee mug hit the table with a sharp clink. "Mom, what the hell is going on? You're scaring me." "I can't explain right now. I just need you to trust me, okay? Can you do that?" For a long moment, Sophia stared at her. Maria watched her daughter's face cycle through confusion, concern, and finally the kind of determination that had carried them both through Jake's death and everything that followed. "How long?" Sophia asked. "I don't know yet. Should I call in sick to work?" "Yes." Sophia drained her coffee and stood. "Give me 10 minutes." As her daughter disappeared into her bedroom, Maria felt the last threads connecting her to their old life snap one by one. Their apartment, their routines, their careful existence built on half-truths and willful ignorance, all of it receding like a shoreline viewed from a departing ship. She wrapped the jars more securely in their towel, then added them to her own hastily packed bag. Evidence of 23 murders, including one that might have made her an accessory, evidence that could destroy the desert ghosts, implicate Raul and others who'd been family to them, unravel every support system they'd depended on since Jake died. Evidence that belonged to families who'd been waiting decades for answers. When Sophia emerged with her backpack, She found Maria standing by the front door, car keys in hand, looking like a woman about to step off a cliff. "Where are we going?" Sophia asked. "To find the truth," Maria said, and opened the door to a future she couldn't predict or control. Behind them, the apartment felt suddenly hollow, as if it already belonged to someone else. They were crossing the threshold now. There would be no going back. The Honda's air conditioning had given up completely by the time they reached the outskirts of Bakersfield. Maria drove with both windows down, hot wind whipping through the car like dragon's breath, while Sophia sat in the passenger seat pretending to check her phone, but actually watching her mother's white knuckles on the steering wheel. "Mom, seriously, where are we going?" Maria had been dreading that question for the past 20 miles. She couldn't keep driving aimlessly, burning gas they couldn't spare, avoiding conversations that would only get harder with time. But every possible answer felt like stepping into quicksand. "Fresno," she said finally. "There's someone I need to talk to. About the storage unit, about your father." The words hung in the superheated air between them. Sophia's phone went still in her hands, and Maria felt the quality of her daughter's attention shift from worried to laser-focused. "What about Dad?" Before Maria could answer, her phone rang through the car's Bluetooth. Raoul's name appeared on the dashboard display, and Maria's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd turned off her phone's location services an hour ago, but the Desert Ghosts had other ways of keeping track of family. "You gonna answer that?" Sophia asked. Maria let it go to voicemail, but they both knew Raoul wouldn't stop calling. He'd keep trying until he got worried enough to drive to their apartment, and when he found it empty, he'd start making other calls. The club had a network that stretched across 3 counties, truckers, mechanics, bartenders, diner workers who'd spot their Honda and report back within hours. "He's going to be pissed," Sophia said quietly. "I know." Another call, this time from a number Maria didn't recognize. Then another from Tommy Morrison, one of Jake's old riding partners. The phone had become a ticking bomb in her purse, each ring marking time until their disappearance became an official club problem. "Mom, you're freaking me out. What the hell did you find in that storage unit?" Maria took the next exit, pulling into a truck stop that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1980s. 18-wheelers sat baking in the sun like beached whales, their drivers probably sleeping through the heat in air-conditioned cabs. She parked in the shade of a corrugated metal awning and turned off the engine. "Before I tell you," she said, "I need you to know that everything I have ever told you about your father being a good man, that was real. He loved you more than anything in this world. That part was never a lie." Sophia's face went pale under her tan. There are things about that night he died that I never told you, things I didn't understand myself until yesterday." Maria reached into the back seat for her bag, unwrapping the towel to reveal 2 of the jars. She'd brought the ones with coordinates she could verify, Anna Kowalski and Christopher Hayes, victims with clear documentation and active family members who might talk to her. "Jesus Christ, Mom. What are those?" "Evidence." Maria held up Anna's jar, pointing to Jake's initials scratched into the metal lid. "This girl disappeared in 1998, the same night I drove your father out to Rabbit Canyon and waited in the car while he and some other club members buried something I was told never to ask about." Sophia stared at the jar like it might explode. "You think Dad killed her?" "I think he was there when she died. I think he helped dispose of her body. And I think there are 21 other families who deserve to know what happened to their loved ones." The silence stretched between them like a fault line. Maria watched her daughter process information that would reshape her entire understanding of her family history. Sophia had Jake's eyes, his stubborn chin, his way of going very still when she was working through complicated problems. "The night he died," Sophia said slowly, "you always said it was an accident." "It was. Wrong place, wrong time, bad luck with a drunk driver. But the place he was coming from," Maria swallowed hard. "He'd called me that evening, said he had to take care of some club business, said he'd be home by midnight." Sophia's phone buzzed with a text. She glanced at it, and her expression darkened. Raoul's at our apartment. He says your car's gone and he's worried. The net was tightening. Soon Raoul would call in favors, ask the right questions, start tracking their route north. The desert ghosts protected their own, but that protection came with expectations of loyalty and silence that Maria had just violated by running. There's a woman in Fresno, Maria continued. Dr. Janet Kowalski, Anna's mother. She's been running a support group for families of missing persons for the past 20 years. If I'm going to do this, if I'm going to turn over evidence, she deserves to know first. Sophia was quiet for a long moment, staring at the jar in Maria's hands. Then she looked up, and her expression held a resolve that reminded Maria painfully of Jake. How long do we have before they find us? The question told Maria everything she needed to know about her daughter's choice. Not whether to support her, but how to survive what came next. Not long, Maria admitted. Maybe 6 hours if we're lucky. Sophia buckled her seatbelt. Then we better drive fast. Maria pressed the accelerator harder than she'd intended, the Honda lurching forward as they merged back onto Highway 99. The speedometer climbed past 75, then 80, dangerous in a car this old, but Sophia was right about needing to move fast. In her rearview mirror, every pickup truck looked like it might belong to the desert ghosts. Tell me about her, Sophia said, watching the landscape blur past. Anna. Maria's throat tightened. She'd spent the night memorizing details from missing persons reports, but talking about Anna Kowalski as a real person instead of evidence felt different. 22 years old. Graduate student at UC Davis, studying environmental science. She was camping alone in the Mojave when she disappeared. Alone. Sophia's voice carried the particular horror of a young woman contemplating such vulnerability. Why would anyone camp alone out there? She was collecting soil samples for her thesis, something about how desert plants adapt to contaminated ground. Maria had found Anna's academic profile online, read her published research papers, seen photos of a smiling blonde woman who looked younger than Sophia did now. Her car was found 3 days later, but her body never was. The jar containing Anna's remains sat wrapped in the back seat, reduced to commemorative coins by someone who'd seen her death as an achievement worth preserving. Maria's hands tightened on the steering wheel until her knuckles ached. Sophia was quiet for several miles, processing. When she finally spoke, her voice was carefully controlled. How many others had Dad's initials? 4. The number had burned itself into Maria's memory. Anna was the first. The last one was in 2003, about 2 years after you were born. So he stopped? Maria wanted to say yes, wanted to believe that fatherhood had changed Jake fundamentally, made him incapable of the violence those jars represented. But the dates told a different story, a gradual escalation through the 1990s, then nothing after Sophia's birth. Either Jake had found redemption in becoming a father, or he'd gotten better at hiding his activities. I don't know, she admitted. The storage unit wasn't his. Someone else was collecting those jars, documenting everything. Maybe Jake was just muscle helping with disposal. Maybe he was more involved. I won't know until I start asking questions. Her phone rang again. Big Mike this time. Maria silenced it without looking, but the calls were coming more frequently now. The club's informal communication network was activating, spreading word that Maria Santos had gone off script. Soon they'd stop calling and start tracking in earnest. What if we're wrong? Sophia asked suddenly. What if Dad was trying to stop it? What if he was gathering evidence to turn someone in? The hope in her daughter's voice was heartbreaking. Maria had entertained the same fantasy during the long hours before dawn, constructing elaborate scenarios where Jake was the hero instead of the villain. But those theories crumbled against the weight of memory, his nervousness that night at Rabbit Canyon, the way he'd refused to meet her eyes when he climbed back into the car, his insistence that she never mention the trip to anyone. Maybe, Maria said, though she didn't believe it. That's what we're going to find out. They passed a highway patrol cruiser parked on the shoulder, radar gun pointed at traffic. Maria eased off the gas, suddenly paranoid that Raoul might have reported her car stolen. might have turned their flight into a police matter. But the officer didn't move, and they swept past without incident. "I keep thinking about all the times he held me," Sophia said quietly. "When I was little, when I had nightmares. Were those hands—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Those hands loved you," Maria said fiercely. "Whatever else they did, that was real. Don't let this poison every memory." But even as she spoke, Maria knew it was impossible advice. The revelation would contaminate everything retrospectively, every bedtime story, every piggyback ride, every moment of tenderness tainted by the possibility of violence. Sophia would spend years parsing her childhood memories, searching for signs she'd missed, wondering what kind of monster had tucked her in at night. The Fresno exit appeared ahead, and Maria felt her stomach clench with anticipation and dread. Dr. Janet Kowalski lived somewhere in this sprawling Central Valley city, probably never imagining that a former Hell's Angel would show up at her door carrying the remains of her murdered daughter. "What if she doesn't believe us?" Sophia asked. "Then we go to the police." Maria signaled for the exit, committing them to the path she'd chosen, but she deserves the chance to hear it first, to have some control over how this gets handled. Her phone buzzed with a text from Raoul. "Where the fuck are you?" The language was sharper than usual, tinged with an urgency that made Maria's pulse quicken. Time was running out faster than she'd hoped. Within hours, the desert ghosts would mobilize fully, and Maria would have to choose between protecting her family and protecting the truth. "Whatever happens next," she told Sophia as they descended into Fresno's heat-shimmering sprawl, "we're in this together now." Sophia reached across the center console and squeezed her mother's hand. Her grip was steady, adult, ready for whatever revelations awaited them in the approaching confrontation. The address Maria had found online led them to a modest ranch-style house in northeast Fresno, where drought-stressed lawns and chain-link fences stretched toward the Sierra Nevada foothills. Dr. Janet Kowalski's home sat behind a weathered wooden fence, its yard overgrown with native plants that seemed to thrive despite the punishing heat. Maria parked across the street and stared at the house, the weight of Anna's jar in her lap suddenly feeling immense. Somewhere behind those walls lived a woman who'd spent 25 years wondering what happened to her daughter. Maria was about to deliver an answer that would be both relief and devastation, confirmation that Anna was dead, but also proof that her final moments had been someone's twisted trophy. "She might not be home," Sophia said, though they could see a Prius in the driveway and blinds pulled against the afternoon sun. "She's home." Maria's voice came out rougher than she intended. "I called her office this morning. The receptionist said Dr. Kowalski was working from home today." The lie had come easily, Maria claiming to be a journalist researching cold cases, asking for a brief interview about missing persons advocacy. She'd hung up before the receptionist could transfer the call, but it had given her the information she needed. Dr. Kowalski would be unprepared, vulnerable, probably willing to talk to anyone who showed genuine interest in Anna's case. Maria's phone buzzed again. This time it was Tommy Morrison. "Raoul says, get your ass home now. Whatever you're thinking, don't." The message carried an undertone of genuine fear that made Maria's chest tighten. Tommy had been Jake's closest friend in the club, the one who'd spoken at his funeral about brotherhood and loyalty. If he was scared enough to reach out directly, it meant the situation was escalating beyond normal club discipline. "They know something," Sophia said, reading over her mother's shoulder. "About what's in those jars." Maria felt pieces clicking together in her mind, connections she'd been too overwhelmed to see clearly. The storage unit hadn't been abandoned randomly. Someone had stopped paying rent for a reason, and that someone was likely connected to the desert ghosts. If Raoul knew about the jars, if he understood what Maria had found, then this wasn't just about protecting Sophia's memory of her father anymore. This was about protecting a conspiracy that had claimed 23 lives. "We should call the police," Sophia said, but her voice lacked conviction. "With what? Jars full of metal tokens and a dead husband's initials?" Maria shook her head. "They'll want more than that before they take on the desert ghosts. And once word gets out that we're talking to cops, She didn't need to finish. They both understood what happened to people who crossed organized crime, even the relatively small-time version the club represented. The desert ghosts weren't the Hell's Angels. They lacked the resources and reach of the larger clubs, but they had enough connections to make life very dangerous for former members who broke silence. "So we do this alone," Sophia said. "We do this right." Maria unwrapped Anna's jar, studying the precise engravings on its surface. Someone had taken time with each piece, treating the murders as art projects worthy of permanent commemoration. The care involved suggested pride, ownership, the kind of psychological signature that profilers wrote books about. Dr. Kowalski will know people, victims' rights advocates, journalists, maybe FBI contacts. She's been fighting for answers for 25 years. She'll know how to handle evidence like this. Maria opened the car door before she could lose her nerve. The heat hit her like a physical blow, but it also felt clarifying, a reminder that comfort and safety were luxuries she'd forfeited the moment she decided to open those jars. Sophia climbed out of the passenger side, and they stood together on the baking asphalt, staring at Dr. Kowalski's house like it was the entrance to another dimension. Once they knocked on that door, there would be no more secrets, no more willful ignorance, no more protection from the truth about Jake's involvement in whatever darkness those jars represented. "You ready?" Maria asked. Sophia nodded, but her face was pale despite the heat. "What do we tell her first?" "That we found her daughter." Maria cradled Anna's jar against her chest. "Everything else comes after that." They crossed the street together, Maria's heart hammering with each step. Behind them, their Honda sat baking in the sun like abandoned evidence of their old lives. Ahead, a doorbell waited to summon a grieving mother who'd spent decades hoping for exactly this moment and dreading it. Maria raised her hand to knock and felt the last threads of her connection to the desert ghosts snap like overstressed cables. Whatever protection the club had offered, whatever family they'd represented, was gone now. She and Sophia were on their own, carrying evidence that could destroy lives and expose decades of buried violence. Her knuckles made contact with Dr. Kowalski's door, 3 sharp raps that echoed like gunshots in the afternoon stillness. The ordeal had begun. Footsteps approached from inside the house, slow, cautious, the gait of someone who'd learned to be wary of unexpected visitors. Maria clutched Anna's jar tighter, her palms slick with sweat that had nothing to do with the oppressive heat. The door opened to reveal a woman in her 70s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, wearing a faded UC Davis t-shirt that looked like it had been worn thin by decades of grief. Dr. Janet Kowalski studied them through the screen door with the particular wariness of someone who'd fielded too many false leads and cruel hoaxes. "If you're selling something—" "Dr. Kowalski," Maria interrupted, her voice cracking slightly. "My name is Maria Santos. I called your office this morning. I have information about Anna." The woman's face went very still. Maria had seen that expression before, the desperate hope warring with practiced skepticism that marked families of the long missing. Dr. Kowalski's gaze dropped to the jar in Maria's hands, taking in the careful engravings, the weight of it, the reverent way Maria held it. "What kind of information?" "I found her." The words came out as barely a whisper. "I found what's left of her." Dr. Kowalski's hand went to her throat, fingers finding a small pendant that Maria now realized was probably Anna's jewelry, something kept close for 25 years. The screen door between them suddenly felt like a barrier between the world of terrible possibilities and the world of confirmed nightmares. "You should come inside," Dr. Kowalski said, her voice carefully controlled. The house was cool and dim, filled with the accumulated grief of a quarter-century. Photos of Anna covered every surface. Graduation pictures, camping trips, family holidays frozen in time. Maria felt like an intruder carrying death into a shrine of life. Dr. Kowalski gestured them toward a living room that overlooked the overgrown backyard. "Sit. Tell me everything." Maria placed Anna's jar on the coffee table between them, watching Dr. Kowalski's face crumble as she read the engravings. her daughter's initials, the date she disappeared, coordinates that would lead to empty desert if anyone cared to check. "The coins," Dr. Kowalski whispered, understanding immediately what she was looking at. "They're made from her jewelry, her personal effects." "I'm so sorry." The older woman reached toward the jar with shaking hands, then pulled back as if it might burn her. "Where did you find this?" Maria explained about the storage unit, the 23 other jars, the coordinates that matched missing persons cases across 3 decades. She watched Dr. Kowalski's expression shift from devastation to horrified comprehension. This wasn't just about Anna anymore. "You said your name was Santos," Dr. Kowalski said suddenly, her voice sharpening. "Your husband, was he Jake Santos? Died in a motorcycle accident in 2004? Maria's blood turned to ice. "How do you know that?" "Because I've been tracking every lead in Anna's case for 25 years. Dr. Kowalski stood abruptly, moving to a filing cabinet that dominated one corner of the room. She pulled out a thick folder, spreading photographs across the coffee table next to Anna's jar. These were taken at a Desert Ghosts gathering in 1998, 2 weeks before Anna disappeared. Maria stared at the surveillance photos, grainy images of men in motorcycle leathers, beer bottles raised in celebration. In the center of one photo, unmistakably younger but definitely Jake, his arm around another biker Maria didn't recognize. The FBI suspected the club was involved in several disappearances, Dr. Kowalski continued, her voice gaining strength. They could never prove anything, but they kept files. When your husband died, they lost their best potential informant. Informant? Sophia spoke for the first time since entering the house, her voice barely audible. Dr. Kowalski pulled out another document, official letterhead, FBI case notes. Jake Santos approached federal agents in early 2004. He was prepared to testify about Desert Ghosts' involvement in organized crime, including murder. He died 3 days before his first formal interview. The words hit Maria like physical blows. Jake had been planning to talk. He'd been ready to expose the truth, to seek redemption for whatever he'd participated in. The accident that killed him wasn't random bad luck, it was silencing. "They murdered him," Maria whispered. "We could never prove it. The drunk driver who hit him had no obvious connection to the club, but the timing..." Dr. Kowalski's voice trailed off. Maria's phone erupted with calls. Raul, Tommy, numbers she didn't recognize. The screen lit up with notifications, a digital assault that made Sophia flinch. Through Dr. Kowalski's front window, Maria glimpsed a familiar pickup truck rolling slowly down the street. "They found us," Sophia breathed. The truck paused in front of the house. Through the tinted windshield, Maria could make out 2 figures, Raul in the passenger seat pointing at their Honda parked across the street. 25 years of careful investigation. Evidence that could expose decades of murder. A mother's desperate need for justice, all of it about to be destroyed by men who'd killed Maria's husband to keep their secrets safe. Maria reached for Dr. Kowalski's landline, but the older woman grabbed her wrist. "They're jamming cell towers," Dr. Kowalski said grimly. "And I cut the phone lines an hour ago." Maria stared at her in confusion, then horror as understanding dawned. The woman wasn't a grieving mother seeking justice. She was bait. The room tilted sideways as Maria's perception shattered and reformed. Dr. Kowalski's grief-stricken expression hadn't changed, but now Maria could see beneath it the calculated patience of someone who'd been waiting years for this exact moment. "You're one of them," Maria whispered, her hand instinctively reaching for Sophia. "The jars. You already knew about the jars." "I've known about them for 15 years. Dr. Kowalski's voice remained gentle, but there was steel underneath now. "Ever since my real employer started using that storage unit." The photographs scattered across the coffee table suddenly made terrible sense. Not FBI surveillance, club intelligence, the careful documentation of Jake's federal contact, his growing willingness to cooperate. The timing of his death hadn't been coincidence at all. "Anna was never your daughter," Sophia said, the words coming out flat and shocked. Anna Kowalski was a runaway from Sacramento. No family to speak of, no one to ask difficult questions when she disappeared. The older woman moved casually toward the front window, peering through the blinds at the pickup truck idling outside. She made perfect practice for newer members who needed to prove their commitment. Maria's mind raced through the implications. The storage unit hadn't been abandoned. It had been bait, left where someone like her might find it. The careful labeling, the GPS coordinates, even the connection to missing persons cases, all of it designed to flush out anyone who might pose a threat to the club's operations. "How long have you been watching me?" Maria asked. "Since the moment you bought that unit. The auctioneer was one of ours," he called as soon as you drove away. Dr. Kowalski smiled, and Maria finally saw the predator beneath the grieving mother mask. "We needed to know if you'd stay quiet or if you'd inherited your husband's troublesome conscience." The pickup truck's doors opened. Raoul emerged from the passenger side, followed by a man Maria didn't recognize, younger, harder-looking, wearing the kind of boots designed for violence rather than riding. They moved with purposeful calm toward the house, and Maria realized they'd been planning this confrontation from the beginning. "Jake really was going to talk," Maria said, understanding flooding through her. "You killed him to protect this." Jake was weak. He let fatherhood make him sentimental. Dr. Kowalski's tone carried genuine disgust. 20 years of loyal service, and he threw it away because he couldn't handle the weight of necessary choices. Sophia's hand found Maria's, her grip tight with terror and rage. "Those people in the jars, you helped kill them." "I provided psychological profiles, helped select targets who wouldn't be missed, wouldn't generate sustained investigation." The confession came easily, like Dr. Kowalski was discussing academic research rather than mass murder. The club needed someone with credentials, someone who could interface with law enforcement without raising suspicion. Heavy footsteps approached the front door. Maria's eyes swept the room, looking for escape routes, weapons, anything that might give them a chance. But Dr. Kowalski had chosen her trap well. The house's layout funneled them toward the front entrance, and the backyard was surrounded by high fencing. "The coins," Maria said suddenly. "Jake's initials on 4 jars. You made him participate directly. Initiation rituals. Each new member had to contribute to the collection, had to prove they could cross lines that couldn't be uncrossed. Dr. Kowalski's clinical detachment was more horrifying than obvious malice. Your husband was very good at the physical aspects, less good at keeping quiet afterward." The front door opened without ceremony. Raoul entered first, his familiar face now wearing an expression Maria had never seen before. Cold calculation mixed with something that might have been regret. Behind him came the younger man, who moved like violence was his primary language. "Dr. K." Raoul nodded respectfully to the older woman. "Any problems?" She brought everything, just as predicted. The daughter, too. Dr. Kowalski gestured toward Anna's jar sitting on the coffee table. "They've seen enough to be dangerous, but not enough to have contacted authorities yet." Maria felt the walls of her world completing their collapse. Raoul, who'd helped her move after Jake's death, who'd fixed Sophia's bicycle and attended her school plays, had been managing her as an asset for 20 years. Every kindness, every gesture of Brotherhood loyalty had been about controlling a potential threat. "You've been watching Sophia grow up," Maria said, her voice raw with betrayal. "You held her when she was a baby." "Jake was my brother," Raoul replied, and for a moment genuine emotion flickered across his features. "But the club comes first. It always comes first." The younger man stepped forward, and Maria saw her death in his eyes, professional, inevitable, already decided. Sophia pressed closer to her side, and Maria felt something shift inside her chest. Not acceptance, but clarity. She'd spent 20 years believing in the protection of the desert ghosts, trusting in bonds forged through shared danger and mutual loyalty. Now she understood that she'd been a prisoner all along, kept alive only as long as she remained useful. But prisoners sometimes found ways to fight back. Maria's mind went crystal clear. the kind of sharp focus she remembered from her riding days when split-second decisions meant the difference between life and death. The younger man was reaching inside his jacket, and she had maybe 3 seconds before this became irreversible. "Sophia," she whispered, never taking her eyes off Raoul. "When I move, you run for the kitchen. Back door, Mom. Do it." Maria lunged sideways, grabbing Anna's jar from the coffee table and hurling it at the younger man's head. Glass exploded against his temple, sending coins scattering across the hardwood floor. He staggered, blood streaming down his face, his gun clattering away under Dr. Kowalski's couch. Sophia bolted for the kitchen as Maria dove after the weapon, her fingers closing around the grip just as Raoul's boot caught her in the ribs. Pain exploded through her chest, but she managed to roll away, bringing the gun up as she gasped for air. "Nobody moves," she wheezed, trying to cover all 3 of them at once. Raoul raised his hands slowly, but his expression wasn't afraid. It was calculating. "Maria, you don't want to do this. Think about what happens next. You shoot me, what then? You can't run from the whole club." "Maybe not," Maria said, backing toward the kitchen where she could hear Sophia fumbling with locks. "But I can make sure you don't clean this up quietly." The younger man was getting back to his feet, blood making his face a crimson mask. Dr. Kowalski watched from beside her filing cabinet, no longer bothering to maintain her grieving mother act. The mask had fallen completely, revealing something cold and analytical beneath. "There are contingencies," Dr. Kowalski said calmly. "This house is isolated. Your car will be found in a lake. Missing persons case, no evidence of violence." "Except for the storage unit," Maria replied. 23 other families who deserve to know what happened to their children." She heard the kitchen door bang open, Sophia's footsteps on the back porch. At least her daughter was out, had a chance to run. That was something. "The storage unit will be cleaned out within the hour," Raoul said. "Evidence destroyed, owner paid off, like it never existed." But Maria was thinking about the photos she'd taken with her phone, the careful documentation Sophia had insisted on, pictures uploaded to cloud storage, beyond the reach of anyone who might want to destroy them. Her daughter was smarter than any of them realized. "Sophia's not just running," Maria said, allowing herself a small smile. "She's delivering evidence to every FBI field office between here and Phoenix. Photos of every jar, every label, every GPS coordinate." The lie came easily, but she could see it land. Raoul's confidence flickered. Dr. Kowalski's clinical calm cracked slightly. The younger man wiped blood from his eyes and looked questioningly at the others. "You're bluffing," Dr. Kowalski said, but uncertainty crept into her voice. "Am I? How long has the club been operating? 30 years? How many murders? How many people are going to roll over when the FBI comes knocking with evidence?" Maria kept the gun trained on Raoul, the most dangerous of the 3. "You really think your little conspiracy survives federal investigation?" Through the kitchen window, she glimpsed Sophia disappearing into the maze of backyard fencing that separated Dr. Kowalski's property from her neighbors. The girl moved like her mother had taught her, fast, low, using cover. She'd make it to the street, find help, survive this. That was all Maria needed. "Here's what happens next," she continued, feeling strength flow back into her voice. "You let me walk out of here. I disappear, take my chances running. In exchange, maybe I convince Sophia to hold off on those federal contacts. Give you time to clean house, distance yourselves from the worst of it. Or?" Raoul asked. "Or I put a bullet in your brain right now, and Sophia floods every news outlet in California with photos of dead children's jewelry melted into trophies." Maria's finger tightened on the trigger. "Your choice." The room went silent, except for the drip of blood from the younger man's face, hitting Dr. Kowalski's hardwood floor. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, probably unrelated, but everyone tensed at the sound. Raoul looked at Dr. Kowalski, some silent communication passing between them. 20 years of club loyalty, decades of carefully maintained secrets, all of it crumbling because they'd underestimated a single mother's desperation. "You've got 5 minutes," Raoul said finally. "Then every desert ghost in 3 states comes looking for you." Maria backed toward the kitchen, keeping the gun raised. "Then I better not waste them." She turned and ran for the door, leaving behind the only family she'd known since Jake's death, carrying nothing but the clothes on her back and the terrible knowledge of what that family really was. But for the first time in 20 years, she was finally free. Maria burst through Dr. Kowalski's back door into the blazing afternoon heat, her lungs burning as she scanned the maze of suburban fencing for any sign of Sophia. The gun felt alien in her grip. She hadn't held one since Jake's death, when she'd sold his collection to pay funeral expenses. 20 years of trying to forget that world, and here she was running for her life through Bakersfield, backyards, like some desperate criminal. "Sophia!" she called in a harsh whisper, vaulting over a low chain-link fence into the neighbor's drought-brown lawn. No answer, but she could see disturbed dust where someone had scrambled through the gap between 2 houses. Her daughter was smart. She'd keep moving until she found people, witnesses, safety. Behind her, angry voices erupted from Dr. Kowalski's house. The 5 minutes were already evaporating. Maria's phone had 3 bars but no service. They really were jamming signals. She needed to get distance, find a landline, contact authorities before the club's network could mobilize. But even as she ran, the futility pressed down on her. The desert ghosts had connections throughout California law enforcement. How many cops, how many federal agents, how many judges had been compromised over 3 decades of careful cultivation? Jake had tried to do the right thing, and they'd murdered him for it. The realization hit her like a physical blow as she crouched behind a storage shed, trying to catch her breath. All these years she'd blamed herself for Jake's death. If she'd been a better wife, if she hadn't nagged him about the late nights and secretive phone calls, if she'd tried harder to understand his world, instead of demanding he choose between the club and his family. But Jake hadn't died because of her failures. He'd died because he'd found the courage she was only discovering now. Her husband had been a serial killer's accomplice. He'd helped murder at least 4 people, melting down their jewelry into commemorative coins like some sick trophy collection. But in the end, he'd chosen redemption over loyalty, chosen his daughter's future over his own survival, the same choice she was making now. Maria pulled out her phone and deleted every contact connected to the desert ghosts. Raoul, Tommy, the garage where they'd fixed her car for free, the bail bondsman who'd helped Sophia's friend last year. 20 years of accumulated favors and relationships, all of it poisoned by the knowledge of what lay beneath the Brotherhood mythology. Sophia would have to understand. They couldn't go back to Bakersfield, couldn't reclaim their old life. The apartment, Sophia's school, the job at the medical center, all of it was gone now. But maybe that wasn't entirely bad. Maybe they'd been prisoners all along, kept comfortable and compliant while the club managed them as potential threats. A car engine roared to life from the direction of Dr. Kowalski's house. They were mobilizing faster than she'd hoped. Maria broke from cover, running toward the commercial district she could see beyond the residential maze. A shopping center meant people, security cameras, places to hide while she figured out her next move. But with each step, the weight of her situation pressed heavier. Even if she reached the FBI, even if someone believed her story, the evidence was circumstantial. The storage unit would be cleaned out within hours. Dr. Kowalski would disappear, probably already had an extraction plan. The coins could be melted down again, GPS coordinates scrubbed from databases. Without the physical evidence, she had nothing but the testimony of a desperate woman with obvious motives to lie about her dead husband's criminal associates, unless Sophia really had taken photos. The thought stopped Maria cold in the middle of someone's vegetable garden. Her daughter was clever, methodical, always thinking 3 steps ahead. She'd insisted on documenting everything at the storage unit, had spent 20 minutes photographing every jar from multiple angles. Had Sophia been thinking like Jake, planning for the possibility that someone might try to destroy the evidence? Maria's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, parking lot behind Walgreens. Come alone. Her heart hammered as she recognized the careful way Sophia constructed sentences, the specific grammar their family used for serious communication. The girl had found somewhere safe, somewhere public enough that the club couldn't make moves without witnesses. But as Maria changed direction toward the shopping center, she caught sight of two motorcycles threading through traffic in the distance, familiar silhouettes that made her stomach clench. The 5 minutes were up. The manhunt had begun. She broke into a full sprint, abandoning stealth for speed. Behind her, the motorcycle's engines grew louder, echoing off the suburban streets like mechanical hunting calls. They'd found her trail. Maria gripped the stolen gun tighter and ran toward her daughter, toward whatever slim chance they had of exposing 30 years of murder before the desert ghosts silenced them both forever. The final confrontation was coming, and she was done running from the truth. The Walgreens parking lot shimmered in the brutal August heat, asphalt soft enough to leave footprints. Maria spotted Sophia immediately, crouched between two parked cars near the pharmacy entrance. Her backpack clutched against her chest like armor. The girl's face was streaked with dust and tears, but her eyes held the same fierce determination that had gotten them this far. "Mom," Sophia whispered as Maria dropped down beside her. "I got the photos uploaded, all of them. Cloud storage, email accounts, everything." Maria's chest flooded with relief and terror in equal measure. Her 17-year-old daughter had just declared war on a criminal organization that had been perfecting murder for 3 decades. "Sophia, baby, you need to—" "No." Sophia's voice carried steel Maria had never heard before. "I know what you're going to say. Run, hide, let you handle this. But Dad tried to handle it alone and they killed him. I'm not losing you too." The motorcycle engines were getting closer, their distinctive rumble cutting through traffic noise like a blade. Maria peered over the car's hood and counted 4 bikes approaching from different directions. Not the chaotic pursuit she'd expected, but a coordinated hunting pattern. They were being herded. "They're not trying to catch us yet," she realized. "They're driving us somewhere specific." Sophia pulled out her phone, screen cracked but functional. "I sent everything to 3 FBI field offices and uploaded backups to every major news outlet in California. Time-delayed releases if I don't check in every 6 hours." Her fingers moved across the screen with practiced efficiency. "Also sent copies to that true crime podcaster who covered the Riverside missing girls. She's got 2 million subscribers." Maria stared at her daughter, seeing Jake's strategic mind behind Sophia's young features. While she'd been paralyzed by betrayal and 20 years of conditioned loyalty, Sophia had been thinking like a survivor. "How long do we have?" Maria asked. "First release goes live at midnight unless I stop it, but the FBI got theirs an hour ago." Sophia's smile held no warmth. "I may be 17, but I'm not stupid. The desert ghosts have been controlling our lives since I was born. Time to return the favor." A pickup truck pulled into the lot. Not one Maria recognized, but the driver wore the familiar leather vest of a prospect. Too young to be a full member, probably brought in specifically because she wouldn't know his face. The truck positioned itself near the parking lot's rear exit, cutting off their obvious escape route. "They're boxing us in," Sophia observed with unsettling calm. Maria's phone buzzed with an incoming call. Raoul's number. She answered but didn't speak. "Maria." His voice carried exhaustion rather than anger. "You need to stop this, right now." "Stop what? Telling the truth about what you people have been doing? You don't understand the full picture. The Desert Ghosts aren't just some motorcycle club. We're connected to operations that go way beyond what you found in that storage unit. You pull this thread, a lot of innocent people get hurt." Maria watched another motorcycle cruise past the pharmacy entrance, the rider's helmet turning toward their hiding spot with predatory interest. Innocent like Anna Kowalski? Like the 22 other kids in those jars? Those weren't random kills, Maria. Every target was carefully selected. Pedophiles, drug dealers, people who preyed on children. The club was cleaning up what law enforcement couldn't touch. The justification hit like a physical slap. For a moment, Maria wavered. Jake had always talked about the club's code, their loyalty to protecting families and neighborhoods. Had she misunderstood something fundamental about what they'd discovered? But then she looked at Sophia's face, 17 years old, forced to become a tactical genius just to survive the family legacy she'd inherited. Whatever noble intentions might have started the Desert Ghost's killing spree, it had devolved into something monstrous enough that her own husband had died trying to escape it. "Even if that's true," Maria said into the phone, "who gave you the right to decide who lives and dies? Who made you judge and executioner? The same system that fails those kids every day. The same courts that let predators walk on technicalities while families suffer." Raoul's voice carried genuine conviction. "Jake understood that once. He was proud of the work we did. Jake wanted out. That's why you killed him." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant rumble of more motorcycles converging on their location. When Raoul spoke again, his tone had shifted to something colder, more final. "Last chance, Maria. Call off your daughter's internet crusade and we'll give you both new identities, fresh start somewhere far away. Keep pushing and this ends the only way it can." Maria looked at Sophia, seeing Jake's stubborn courage in her daughter's eyes. After 20 years of accepting protection from monsters, she finally understood what her husband had learned too late. Some truths were worth dying for. "We're not calling anything off," she said, and hung up. The final test wasn't survival anymore. It was whether she could become the mother Sophia deserved before the Desert Ghosts silenced them both forever. The phone went dead in Maria's hand, just as the first motorcycle roared into the Walgreens parking lot, its engine echoing off the storefront like a war cry. Raoul himself rode the lead bike, his face grim behind dark sunglasses as 3 other Desert Ghosts flanked him in formation. They weren't hiding anymore. This was an execution squad. "Stay low," Maria whispered to Sophia, but her daughter was already moving, army crawling beneath the parked cars toward the pharmacy entrance. "Smart girl. Get inside, find witnesses, make it impossible for them to clean this up quietly." But Raoul had anticipated that. The pickup truck moved to block the store's entrance, while 2 more bikes appeared from the shopping center's side streets. They'd turned the entire parking lot into a kill box. Maria gripped the stolen pistol, her palms slick with sweat. 6 rounds, maybe 7. 4 bikers plus the prospect in the truck. The math was brutal, but she'd learned long ago that survival wasn't about fair odds. It was about making the other guy pay a price he wasn't willing to accept. "Maria Santos." Raoul's voice boomed across the asphalt as he dismounted, pulling something from his jacket. "Not a gun, a phone. Your daughter's little computer game stop now, or everyone in that store becomes collateral damage." Through the pharmacy's glass doors, Maria could see customers browsing the aisles, elderly people picking up prescriptions, a young mother with a baby. Innocent lives that would be destroyed if this turned into a firefight. The Desert Ghost's most effective weapon had always been their willingness to escalate beyond what decent people could stomach. "Let me guess," Maria called back, still crouched behind the car. "You've got someone inside? Another prospect with a gun, ready to spray bullets if I don't surrender?" Raoul's smile was visible even from 50 feet away. Tommy's youngest boy, eager to prove himself. 17 years old, just like your Sophia. Funny how these things work out. The threat hit exactly as intended. Maria's vision blurred with rage as she understood the full cruelty of their position. They weren't just threatening random civilians. They were using another club kid, someone probably as trapped by family loyalty as Sophia had been, the cycle perpetuating itself through another generation. But Sophia was done playing by their rules. The explosion of shattering glass came from the store's rear exit as her daughter kicked through an emergency door, setting off alarms that shrieked across the parking lot. The girl rolled behind a dumpster and immediately started shouting at the top of her lungs. "Help! Kidnapping! Armed men!" Her voice carried with shocking authority, trained by years of watching her mother navigate crisis situations. "Someone call 911. Armed bikers threatening civilians." Other shoppers began pouring out of the store's main entrance, some running for their cars, others pulling out phones to record. Within seconds, the desert ghost's controlled environment had become a chaotic scene with dozens of witnesses and multiple camera angles. Raoul's calm facade cracked. "Shut her up!" he barked at his men. That's when Maria moved. She broke from cover in a dead sprint, not toward Sophia, but directly at Raoul, closing the distance before any of them could react. 20 years of suppressed fury erupted in a single moment as she tackled him to the scorching asphalt, the gun pressed against his throat. "Call them off," she screamed, loud enough for every phone camera to capture. "Call off your psychopath killers." Raoul struggled beneath her, but Maria had learned violence in the same unforgiving schools that had shaped him. She'd been a desert ghost old lady for 15 years, had survived beatings from rivals, had fought off sexual assaults from visiting chapters. Her body remembered how to hurt people. "You have no idea what you're destroying," Raoul gasped. "Good," Maria snarled. "I hope it burns to the ground." The other bikers were moving now, but carefully. Too many witnesses, too many cameras, too much chaos to control. One drew a pistol anyway, aiming for Maria's head with professional steadiness. She saw death approaching and felt only fierce satisfaction that Sophia would survive this, that the truth would outlive them both. The gunshot cracked across the parking lot like thunder, but it wasn't Maria who fell. The biker's chest exploded in crimson as he toppled backward, his unfired weapon clattering across asphalt. Behind him, Dr. Kowalski stood with a smoking rifle, her matronly disguise completely abandoned. "Nobody shoots anybody else," she commanded with terrifying authority. "This ends now." Maria stared in shock as the woman who'd seemed like a grieving mother revealed herself as something far more dangerous. The cold intelligence that had orchestrated 30 years of perfect murders now taking control of a situation spiraling beyond anyone's ability to manage. "Hello, Maria," Dr. Kowalski said calmly. "We need to talk." The rifle never wavered as Dr. Kowalski approached, her sensible shoes crunching on broken glass. Around them, witnesses scattered like startled birds, cell phone cameras still recording but from safer distances. The woman Maria had thought was just another grieving mother moved with predatory grace, the weapon an extension of her body. "Let him up," Dr. Kowalski ordered, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. Maria kept the pistol pressed to Raoul's throat. "She's the one who's been killing them. She's the collector." Among other things. Dr. Kowalski's smile held no warmth, though I prefer to think of myself as a curator of justice. Each coin represents a life that needed ending, a predator removed from the world. Your husband helped me save dozens of children over the years, by murdering people, by eliminating monsters that the legal system couldn't touch. The rifle shifted slightly, now aimed at Sophia's hiding spot behind the dumpster. Child traffickers, serial rapists, pedophiles who walked free on technicalities. The desert ghosts provided logistics, nothing more. I provided the moral clarity. Raoul wheezed beneath Maria's weight. "Tell her about Anna. Tell her what really happened to your precious victim." Dr. Kowalski's expression darkened. "Anna was my daughter, my brilliant, beautiful girl who got involved with the wrong people, started selling information about my operations to federal agents. I gave her every chance to stop, to choose family loyalty over misguided heroism." Her voice cracked slightly. "In the end, she forced my hand." The revelation hit Maria like ice water. This wasn't about some random serial killer using the club. This was family business, parents and children destroying each other across generations of violence and betrayal, just like she was doing now with Sophia. "You killed your own daughter," Maria whispered. "I preserved the greater good. Anna's sacrifice protected an operation that had eliminated 47 predators over 3 decades. Her selfishness would have set them all free to hurt more children. The rifle's aim never wavered, the same choice you're making now. Your daughter's moral certainty against the safety of countless innocents." Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Sophia's emergency calls had worked, but Maria realized with growing horror that Dr. Kowalski seemed unconcerned by approaching law enforcement. This woman had been operating for 30 years, had connections and contingencies that made the club's corruption look amateur. "Here's what's going to happen," Dr. Kowalski continued conversationally. "Your daughter is going to disable her little internet time bombs, delete every photo, recant every allegation. In exchange, I'll provide you both with new identities and enough money to disappear forever. Clean break, fresh start. And if we refuse, then you join my collection. 2 more coins for the jars, commemorating the mother and daughter who chose self-destruction over family preservation." The woman's eyes found Sophia across the parking lot. "Though I admit, it would be a waste. Your girl has potential, intelligence, strategic thinking, moral flexibility. When survival demands it, she could learn to appreciate the work we do." Maria felt Raúl tense beneath her as he prepared to move when she was distracted. But she was done being manipulated by monsters who wrapped their cruelty in noble intentions. This was the choice Jake had faced: preserve the comfortable lie or risk everything for an ugly truth. "Sophia," she called out, her voice carrying across the chaos. "Upload everything, right now, all of it." "Mom, no." Sophia's voice cracked with terror. "She'll kill you." "Better than letting this continue." Maria pressed the gun harder into Raúl's throat, feeling his pulse hammer against the barrel. "Your father died trying to stop this. We're going to finish what he started." Dr. Kowalski's finger tightened on the rifle trigger. "Last chance. Call her off. Go to hell." The rifle swung toward Maria, but Raúl suddenly bucked upward, throwing her aim off as his survival instincts overrode his loyalty to the operation. The shot went wide, shattering a car window instead of Maria's skull. In that moment of chaos, Sophia emerged from her hiding spot with her phone held high, fingers flying across the screen. "Uploading now," she screamed. 30 years of murder going live in 10 seconds. Dr. Kowalski spun toward the girl with predatory focus, but Maria was already moving, 20 years of suppressed maternal fury unleashing in a single desperate lunge. The 2 women collided in a tangle of violence as police cars flooded into the parking lot, their sirens creating a symphony of Judgment Day. Maria had made her choice: justice over safety, truth over family loyalty, Sophia's future over their shared past. The cost would be everything they'd ever known, but some prices were worth paying. The sacrifice was complete. Now came the reckoning. The reckoning came in waves of flashing red and blue light. Maria rolled away from Dr. Kowalski's prone form as police officers swarmed the parking lot, weapons drawn, shouting commands that barely penetrated the ringing in her ears. Blood trickled from a gash on her forehead where the rifle barrel had caught her during their struggle, but she was alive. Sophia was alive. The truth was uploaded and spreading across the internet like wildfire. Hands where we can see them, everyone on the ground. Maria raised her arms, the stolen pistol falling from numb fingers onto the scorching asphalt. Beside her, Dr. Kowalski groaned and attempted to rise, her matronly facade completely shattered. The woman's lip was split, her carefully arranged grey hair wild with sweat and fury, but her eyes still burned with the fanatic certainty that had driven 30 years of murder. "You have no idea what you've done," she hissed at Maria as handcuffs clicked around her wrists. "Those monsters will be back on the streets within weeks. Every child they hurt is on your conscience now." Maria said nothing. The weight of that possibility would come later, in the quiet hours when adrenaline faded and doubt crept in. For now she focused on Sophia's voice cutting through the chaos, explaining everything to a detective with patient authority that made Maria's chest tighten with pride and heartbreak. Her 17-year-old daughter shouldn't have to be this strong, shouldn't have to carry this burden. But Jake's blood ran true. Sophia would survive whatever came next. Raúl sat against a police cruiser, with his hands zip-tied, blood streaming from his nose. The remaining desert ghosts had scattered when the first patrol units arrived, leaving their chapter president to face the consequences alone. 20 years of loyalty evaporating in a single moment of self-preservation. Maria almost felt sorry for him until she remembered the jars, the coins, the careful records of lives snuffed out with bureaucratic precision. "Mrs. Santos?" A female detective approached, badge reading Martinez. "I'm going to need a full statement, but first, are you injured? Do you need medical attention?" "I'm fine." The words came automatically, though Maria wasn't sure they were true. Something fundamental had broken inside her during the fight, or maybe it had shattered weeks ago when she first opened those storage unit doors. "My daughter. She's safe. Already gave us an impressive briefing on what you found. We've got units heading to the storage facility now." Detective Martinez knelt beside Maria, her voice gentle but professional. "The photos she uploaded, this is going to be big. Federal task force, multi-state investigation, the works. You two may have just solved cases going back decades." Maria watched paramedics load Dr. Kowalski into an ambulance, the woman's wrists still cuffed to the gurney. Even sedated, her face held contemptuous certainty that this setback was temporary, that her network of corruption and justified violence would protect her. Maybe she was right. Maybe the system was too broken to hold someone who'd perfected murder for 30 years. But that wasn't Maria's problem anymore. She'd made her choice, paid the price in blood and betrayal. Whatever came next would have to be enough. Sophia appeared at her side as the detective finished taking preliminary information, her phone clutched protectively against her chest. "The uploads worked," she said quietly. "FBI, news outlets, social media, it's everywhere now. They can't bury this." "Your father would be proud," Maria whispered, then immediately regretted the words. Sophia's face crumpled with exhaustion and grief, the adult composure finally cracking to reveal the terrified teenager underneath. "I'm sorry, Mom. About Dad, about everything. I know you loved him, and now everyone's going to know he was part of this." Maria pulled her daughter close, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo, mixed with fierce sweat and smoke. "He tried to get out. At the end, he chose us over them. That's what matters." Around them, the crime scene continued to unfold with methodical efficiency. Evidence technicians photographed skid marks and blood spatter, witnesses gave statements to uniformed officers, and federal agents began arriving in unmarked sedans. The machinery of justice grinding slowly to life after 30 years of silence. Maria's phone buzzed with notifications, missed calls, text messages, social media alerts as Sophia's evidence dump reached critical mass. Their quiet life in Bakersfield was over forever. Whatever emerged from this wreckage would be raw and uncertain, built on truth instead of comfortable lies. The Desert Ghost's protection was gone. Their financial safety net had evaporated with Raoul's arrest. Sophia would finish her senior year under federal witness protection if they were lucky. Maria would spend months, maybe years, giving depositions and testifying in trials across multiple states. But they were alive. They were free. And for the first time since Jake's death, Maria felt like she could breathe without choking on secrets and blood money. The reckoning was brutal, but it was theirs. The return. 3 months later, Maria stood in the doorway of their new apartment in Sacramento, watching Sophia practice her college interview answers in front of the bathroom mirror. The federal marshals had found them a decent place, 2 bedrooms, secure building, close enough to UC Davis that Sophia could commute when classes started in the fall. "Tell me about a time you overcame adversity," Sophia said to her reflection, then laughed bitterly. "Well, there was this one time I helped expose a 30-year murder conspiracy and watched my entire life explode in a parking lot." "Try the community service answer instead," Maria suggested from the hallway. Sophia caught her eye in the mirror. "You mean the part where I volunteered at the Children's Advocacy Center? Because helping kids felt important after learning my dead father participated in a vigilante murder ring?" The words still carried sharp edges, but Sophia's tone had softened over the past weeks. Therapy helped. So did the letters from victim advocacy groups, from families who'd finally gotten closure after decades of uncertainty, the knowledge that their sacrifice had meaning beyond their own survival. Maria entered the small bathroom, standing beside her daughter at the sink. Their reflections looked tired but clear-eyed, no more shadows of secrets between them. Sophia had cut her hair short, dyed it auburn instead of black. Maria had stopped covering the grey at her temples. They were different people now, shaped by truth instead of comfortable lies. "The UC Davis interviewer won't know about any of that," Maria said gently. "Your records are sealed. You can be whoever you want to be now." "Can I?" Sophia turned to face her. "Because I keep thinking about what Dr. Kowalski said, about Dad helping save kids from traffickers. What if some of those victims were real monsters? What if we let actual predators go free?" It was the question that haunted Maria's sleepless nights, the doubt that crept in during quiet moments. The federal investigation had confirmed 12 of Dr. Kowalski's victims were indeed convicted sex offenders who'd slipped through legal loopholes, men who might have hurt more children if Jake and the Desert Ghosts hadn't delivered them to a woman with surgical precision and no moral qualms about permanent solutions. "Then we'll live with that," Maria said finally, "but we won't live with being executioners. Your father understood that at the end. That's why he was planning to leave." Sophia nodded, but Maria could see the complexity still weighing on her daughter's shoulders. The world wasn't as simple as they'd once believed, wasn't divided cleanly between heroes and villains. Some choices carried consequences that rippled forward in ways that couldn't be calculated or controlled. A knock at the door interrupted Maria's thoughts. Through the peephole, she recognized Detective Martinez, who'd become their primary liaison with the ongoing investigation. "Mrs. Santos, I have some news about the trial." Maria let her in, noting the detective's carefully neutral expression. Sophia emerged from the bathroom immediately tense. "Dr. Kowalski took a plea deal," Martinez announced without preamble. "Life without parole in exchange for providing information about other operations. Turns out your case was just one node in a much larger network." "What kind of network?" Sophia asked. "Vigilante justice groups operating in 12 states. Doctors, lawyers, social workers, people with access to information about criminals who'd escaped prosecution. They'd been coordinating through encrypted channels for almost 40 years. Martinez sat heavily on their small couch. The FBI estimates they eliminated over 300 people. Maria felt the weight of those numbers like a physical blow. 300 lives ended by people who'd convinced themselves they were saving the world. How many of those victims had been genuine monsters? How many had been inconvenient witnesses, potential whistleblowers, people who simply knew too much? "What about the Desert Ghosts?" she asked. Raoul flipped completely. "Gave us everything, names, dates, burial sites. He'll serve 25 years, but he'll live to see the outside again." Martinez studied Maria's face. Most of the club members were just following orders, believing they were disposing of already dead bodies. "Your husband's records show he started asking questions about 6 months before his accident." The word accident hung in the air between them. They all knew better now, understood that Jake's motorcycle crash had been arranged when he became a liability, but proving it after 3 years would be impossible, and Maria had made peace with not knowing every detail of how her husband died. He'd tried to choose them over the club. That was enough. "There's something else," Martinez continued. "The federal witness protection can end whenever you're ready. Dr. Kowalski's network is dismantled, the remaining Desert Ghosts have scattered or been arrested. You're safe to return to your regular lives." Sophia and Maria looked at each other, a wordless conversation passing between them. Return to what? Their old house felt like a museum of lies. Bakersfield held too many ghosts. The Desert Ghosts who'd survived would never forgive them, and the wider community would always see them as either traitors or heroes. Both labels felt equally heavy. "I think we're home," Maria said quietly. Sophia smiled, the first genuinely happy expression Maria had seen from her daughter in months. "Besides, I hear Sacramento has good schools." They were different now, marked by truth and violence, but they were free. That had to be enough. The new beginning. 6 months later, Maria stood in the garden behind their Sacramento apartment. her hands deep in rich soil as she planted tomatoes in the raised beds Sophia had helped her build. The morning sun filtered through the oak tree they'd convinced their landlord to let them keep, casting dappled shadows across the neat rows of seedlings. "Mom, my acceptance letter came." Sophia's voice carried from the kitchen window, carefully neutral. Maria straightened, brushing dirt from her palms. Through the screen, she could see her daughter holding an envelope, her face unreadable. They'd been waiting 3 weeks for UC Davis's decision, both pretending the outcome didn't matter while privately terrified that their shattered past might somehow follow them into Sophia's future. And Maria tried to match her daughter's calm tone. Sophia's composure cracked into a brilliant grin. Full scholarship, pre-med track with a focus on forensic psychology. Maria rushed inside, soil still caked under her fingernails, and wrapped Sophia in a fierce embrace. Her daughter felt solid and real, no longer the terrified teenager who crouched behind cars while uploading evidence to the internet. The Sophia in her arms was choosing her own path, building something meaningful from the wreckage they'd survived. "Dr. Sophia Santos," Maria whispered into her daughter's hair. "It has a nice ring. I want to help people," Sophia said quietly. "The right way this time. No shortcuts, no vigilante justice, just truth and healing." They held each other in their small kitchen, surrounded by the ordinary domestic chaos Maria had learned to treasure. Coffee cups in the sink, textbooks scattered across the table, Sophia's college applications finally complete. The mundane details of a life built on honest ground instead of blood money and lies. Detective Martinez had called last week with news that Dr. Kowalski's network was officially dismantled. 17 people across 12 states had been arrested, including 3 judges and a district attorney who'd been feeding information about criminals who'd escaped prosecution. The woman herself sat in solitary confinement, her surgical precision finally turned inward as she methodically provided federal investigators with every detail of 4 decades worth of coordinated murder. Maria tried not to think about the victims' families still struggling with the complex legacy of their loved ones' deaths. Some had been genuine monsters, whose elimination might have saved innocent lives. Others had been convenience killings, witnesses silenced before they could expose the network's operations. The moral calculus would never balance cleanly, but at least the killing had stopped. Sophia pulled back from their embrace, her eyes bright with tears and possibility. "There's something else. The admissions counselor wants me to consider applying for their victim advocacy program. Apparently my essay about finding truth in impossible situations really resonated." "What did you tell them?" "That I'd think about it." Sophia moved to the window, looking out at the garden Maria had built from scratch in soil that held no secrets. "I keep wondering if we did the right thing, exposing everything, destroying so many lives." It was a conversation they'd had dozens of times, circling around the central question that would probably haunt them forever. Maria joined her daughter at the window, watching a neighbor's cat stalk through their lettuce plants. "Your father spent his last months trying to answer that same question," she said finally. "In the end, he chose us over them. Truth over comfort. I think that's all any of us can do." Sophia nodded, then surprised Maria by laughing. "Remember when our biggest worry was whether you'd find decent furniture in that storage unit? $300 to change our entire lives." Maria shook her head at the memory, though I suppose the furniture would have been simpler. Simpler isn't always better. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the morning light shift across their small piece of honest ground. Maria's hands were stained with soil instead of blood, her daughter's future bright with chosen purpose instead of inherited violence. The desert ghosts were scattered or imprisoned, their protection and their poison finally purged from their lives. Maria's phone buzzed with a text from her new job supervisor at the domestic violence shelter, another night shift available if she wanted the extra hours. It was hard work, listening to stories that echoed with familiar patterns of control and fear, but it felt clean in a way the club's blood money never had. She was building something instead of burying it. Sophia headed upstairs to call her best friend with the college news. leaving Maria alone in the kitchen they'd painted yellow because it reminded them both of sunlight. On the refrigerator, held by magnets, were Sophia's acceptance letters, Maria's work schedule, and a single photo from their old life. Jake, at Sophia's 15th birthday, grinning as she blew out candles, both of them innocent of the darkness that would soon tear their world apart. Maria touched the photo gently, then returned to her garden. The tomatoes needed water, the soil needed tending, and their new life needed the same patient cultivation she'd learned to apply to everything now, one honest day at a time, built on truth that hurt less than the lies that had once kept them whole. They were different now, marked by choices that couldn't be undone, but they were free, and they were together. And in the end, that had to be enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.